All right. So you can see that my paper is in the landscape mode. So if you want to just flip that, if yours was up and down, that would be perfect. And we are going to get started with some drawing. Now, I always draw darker because I want you to be able to see it, but if you draw a little bit lighter handed, it'll be easier for you to erase if you make any mistakes. And I love my eraser. I will be erasing myself, so no worries. There's not too much drawing in this actually. I want to start out by figuring out where is our basically horizon line. So where does the sky meet the land? And I'm gonna say right about there. So you can see I have plenty of room for a road and plenty of room for the sky. If you need to scoot it up or down, totally fine. And then I would like to draw a line over here. And you'll see just in a second where it's coming to. So it goes to this right side of the paper, just a little bit up from the bottom right corner. And I just want to lightly sketch in the bushes that are over here. Kind of looks like a backwards three. And really the last thing that I want us to draw is that palm tree. And really just the trunk of it so that we know where it lives. And that is all we have to draw. I will give everyone a moment to uh, fix anything. If you have a bunch of lines that you want to just clean up, you can do that now. And then we are all done with our drawing. And so we're going to start painting in just a moment. If anybody has never painted before, there are two watercolor techniques, and it's wet on wet and wet on dry. And all that is referring to is, are you getting your paper wet before you put the paint on, or is it staying dry? We will utilize both of those techniques. Your paintbrush always has to be wet, though, in both of them. Because otherwise, if it's a dry paintbrush and it's dry paint, nothing happens. So paintbrush is always wet. So for the sky, we're going to start back to front. This is going to be wet on wet. And I'm going to start putting that water down. You can go right to that line. And you'll notice that my paper is going to start to get shiny because the lights are reflecting on the water. And I kind of use that to see how wet I'm getting something. If it doesn't have much of a reflection, that means it dried out. So you can kind of use the lights that are around you to see how shiny it's making it. If it looks like a puddle, that is too much water. So again, this is the wet on wet technique. And you can see my paper is nice and shiny, but nothing is pooling. And I want to bring our first paint color in, but does anyone need a moment?
Sorry, I missed it. So basically the whole paper should be wet. Is that correct?
This is dry down here.
Oh, okay, okay. Above the line, basically, should be
Yes.
wet. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just give you a second to make sure that that's all good. If anything starts drying, you can always just put a little bit more water on here. That is fine. The other thing that I want to mention is that like my paper is curling a little bit already. It's not a problem. You can, when this is all done, you can stick it under some books, or I even iron it. I turn it upside down, put it on a low setting, no steam, and just get the heat on there and it flattens it out beautifully. So if that ever happens to anything you're painting, that is my quick, easy fix for it. Okay. I want to get some cerulean blue on my brush. You can see it just kind of on the tip there. And because our paper is wet, it just like it just goes and blends on the paper really nice and smooth, which is great for skies. Now, if you can say, I want this to be a clear blue sky sort of day, that is completely fine. In the reference, it has clouds, but you can make your own interpretation. If you do like the clouds, they are very simple. I'm just not putting paint where I want there to be a cloud. So you see how I skipped this whole big spot? That's just the white of the paper, but it turns into a really lovely, fluffy cloud. Same can be said for up here. I've got a little chunk missing. I'm not going to fill that in. So some of this is going to get covered by foliage, and that's fine. I will get that to be more blue, but I wanted to just demonstrate making another cloud. And if you like that little pop of orange that's in the background, you can take a little bit of that lemon yellow and just a little tiny smidge of that alizarin. See, I'm not making a lot of it. Very tiny little bit, but that makes an orange. And the trick here is going in and then stopping messing with it. I put that down, I put that orange down, and now I'm not touching it anymore. And that is our sky. So we can let that dry. Does anyone need a moment before I start talking about the next thing we're going to do? I think we're good. While we are waiting for the sky to dry, I want us to make it's basically going to be a black. You should have indigo and burnt umber. And you don't need to make a lot of this. Just get a little smidge into an area that you can mix it right in the center of your palette. And I like to bring over my burnt umber first. You don't need a lot of this. And then a little bit of the indigo. And my tip for this mixture is that if it looks sepia, like almost like an old Western photograph, you should add a little bit more of the indigo. And if it looks green, then you need a little bit more of the burnt umber. I'm going to give you a little color swatch. So it just is a nice neutral dark color. And once again, that is indigo and burnt umber. I'm going to write that in the meeting chat. And that's going to be helpful for some shading. We've got some like little power lines off in the sky in the distance there. So that's what we're going to use those for at the end. But while we were waiting for this, I thought that that would be a good time to mix our color. And if it's still like really wet in this area on this left side, if you want to take a paper towel and just give it some little tap, tap, taps, just to help it dry a little bit quicker, that would be great. For me, it's still a little bit pooled right in here, but I am not worried about that section right now. That will help that dry quicker because we are going to come over this whole thing in just a little bit. Um, does everyone feel like it's dry enough at this bottom edge to come in and paint down here? Got a thumbs up. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I think we're okay. So I'm going to make my brush is nice and clean. Really, you can swirl it around in that water and even wipe it off on your paper towel. And I want to go down here with my water. And I'm putting water down. Now you might be wondering, well, why were you worried about this being wet if we're going to put that down anyways? If you were to introduce more water here, it would scoot that pigment. It would just make it go. It's called a bloom, and sometimes they're really fun, but I don't want that in this area where we're going to have all this foliage. Okay, so I have a nice gap where it's still wet in there. That's fine. I'm just looking in here. And I would like to start with my lemon yellow. And it's going a little bit over that cerulean blue. This stuff is going to be green anyway, so it's totally fine. Now I started with my yellow because in something like this, we want to start with our lightest color. Yellow is almost always going to be the lightest color with the watercolor paint. Orange is another light one. And then I can take that sap green, get some of it on my brush. And if you take a peek, I still have some just white of the paper showing through, like here, over here. That's fine. It's good to have some of it still showing through because that means we're keeping some highlights. This is still just my sap green. If it looks a little darker, it's just because there's more paint on the paper. So you can kind of mess with putting a smidge more green on top of maybe something that's a little bit lighter green, and you're going to get some different dimension of the colors there. Okay, now this is still wet, which is what we want. And I actually want to get a little alizarin on my brush. And I'm using it just for some pops of color. And I'm really just tapping it in. Tap, 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 tap. Now, the reason I'm doing the tap, 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 tap is because red and green, if you mix them together, they're going to make brown. But if I'm just putting it down and it's not mixing, it's just laying on top of it still comes across as the red. So you see what's happening here? I'm getting that bloom stuff I was talking about. I think it kind of looks cool. Um, but just in case you don't like it there, this is a clean, damp brush. And I got rid of those lines real easily. So same thing over here, clean, damp brush, much better. Does anyone need a moment before I keep going? Okay. Last thing I want to put down right now is just some indigo. So that's that dark blue. Just getting it in some sections here. And if you need to do any other bringing in of paint of colors we've used already, if you look back and you're like, where did my sap green go? It completely disappeared. Now is a good time to come back into anything before we let it dry. We will be doing more to this. This is just our first layer. Does anyone need a moment before we move on? Okay. I think we're pretty good. I would like you to make sure that your brush is once again really clean. So swish it around a few times and you can wipe it on your paper towel. That indigo can be a real stainy color. And we're going to do our first wet on dry. So this is my lemon, and I'm putting this down in this section. Now you can see it's only staying where I'm placing it. It doesn't have that whooshy feel that wet on wet does. but that's because I'm doing it over here this way because I want this to be just a controlled section, and there's not really an advantage to putting a bunch of water down here and waiting till it dries. You can see I am coming up a little bit and going over that sky, and it's turning it a little green. Totally fine. It's going to be a tree. And I'm getting some of that sap green, and I'm just tapping it in here to give this a little bit of texture. And I want you to take just a smidge of that indigo, really tiny, like I barely touched it. If there's still some yellow on your brush, that's fine. And I'm just putting this in the back here. You can see that it's really light. The reason for that is because we want this to look further away from us, so it's really down that path. The technical term for that is atmospheric perspective. So especially if you ever see a whole bunch of mountains, the ones that are further away look lighter. And it's because you have the atmosphere, which has oxygen molecules and all sorts of stuff in it. And the further back it is, then because of that, it's lighter. We will be making this darker in comparison. And I just got a little bit of that sap to go right next to it. Just tap. And do a little more of that indigo, and that just fills that back row up. Does anyone need a moment? Okay, I think we're good. We're gonna let all that stuff dry and come back over here. I want to start off with a little more of that cerulean, so it's the lighter blue. And this is going to be, again, wet on dry. If I am coming back into the sky, you can see as I lay this down, it keeps the brush strokes. So it's kind of more like you're painting with an acrylic, if you've ever worked with that before. Going right on down to that top of that bush. And you can see I'm also starting to go outward and make this kind of spiky. I know that this is still wet, but I'm going to bring some of that lemon into it. And I'm doing it kind of that textured, spiky way that I was just doing this section. Grab my scrap paper just so you can see that again. So like a line, spike, 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 spike. I then want to get a little bit more of that sap green and start filling in the top. I'm okay with it being a little bit spiky like that in the center with that sap. Does anyone need a moment on this top part? Okay. Um, Still with some of that sap, if you could come back into this section, and I'm giving this a tap and glide. So tap, glide, tap, glide. And that's starting to get this whole thing darker, but the lighter stuff from that first wash is still shining through underneath. And we're gonna let that dry. And again, we're gonna come back into this whole thing. I want to look at this section again. And just like we were doing over here, if you want to come in with a little more of your green, just at the bottom, then I want to come in with that red. So that's the Alizarin Crimson. And I want to also come in with that sap green in this tree. And again, I'm very tap and glide, tap and glide. And you can take a little bit of indigo and come in towards the bottom. I'm gonna let that be. If you feel like your red really faded on the left side, 'cause reds do that just as a pigment. Just wanted to give this a bit more of a pop of color. Completely optional. You can be totally fine with what you have over there. Does anyone need a minute on anything?
Yeah, we could use a minute to let things dry.
Okay, no problem.
I have a question while we're letting things dry.
Yeah.
So your tree, those darker shades, I can't seem to do that. When I do it, it's either like too dry or then it's just really watery and I can't seem to um just delineate, you got that little dark area on the right side.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, so we started out pretty light. Um, and that is kind of the key, making sure that it's light on the base. If you feel like it's just all dark at this point, what you can do is come back in and take a clean, damp brush and give it a scrub. And then that's going to give you a lift. So I know I did that on that gray that I just did a swatch of. And you can take your paper towel and lift it even more out. So that's one way if you feel like the whole thing is just completely too dark. Um, the
Oh,
other
sorry,
way.
I want to add the dark, like how you have on the right side of the tree.
Oh, I know. But
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
if you take some of the, if you get it lighter, that makes it darker what it looks like, you know? Um, so I just wanted to show both
I
ways.
yeah.
Um, and so then if you're like, well, it all just looks too light, when you're sure it's dry, I want you to make sure that your brush is more like damp instead of wet. So you can see that I still have the green on it. It did go on the brush. And it's just about how much paint you get on it. But if this whole section over here was too dark, that's when you can do that lifting, scrubbing and lifting. If it's still if it's still not doing it just with that sap green, you can take a smidge, teeny little smidge of the indigo and bring that into it. That will darken it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did anybody else have questions while we're letting things dry? Do we still need some drying time?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So let's take a peek at the road. So what I want to do is get that cerulean blue on my brush a little bit. And I want to go up and down with my streaks, up and down. And then just with some water, I'm making sure that it is nice and blended. And you can take a little bit of that lemon right in here. It almost looks like you're painting with dirty water. Like it's barely anything, but it does give it some color. And I'm doing that same thing, being very streaky with it. And I'm gonna let that dry. And while that's drying, if you could get some burnt umber on your brush and come into that trunk of the palm tree. I'll give the road another moment before we come back into it. If you could take that black that we made, get just a little bit of it on your brush. Make sure that your brush isn't too wet so that it doesn't just put a big glob. And I'm actually going to turn this upside down just for a moment so that we don't put our wrist in anything that is wet. And the palm tree, the leaves are going to go right about here. And that wire is right back here. And with something like this, I tried to do it quicker. Oops, I didn't mean to put it in the leaves. That's okay. I try to do it quick because then it tends to look better. If I can do it in one brush stroke, that's awesome. If it has to be a couple of little ones, that's okay too. And then you can flip that back the correct way. And my road here is dry. I want to just take a little bit of that gray and bring it onto, and by gray I mean the black, barely touched with your paintbrush. If you put a little too much on, just get some water and blend that out. And then what we put on there becomes more of an undertone. I'm just going to get it a little bit darker on this left side. Does anyone need a moment on the road?
Yes, we need a second.
Okay.
We're good, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. If you could get some of that indigo on your brush, and I'm just coming in and giving this some tap, 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 taps. You can see that that's going to start to give it some texture. This is what wet on dry is really wonderful for, is giving things texture like this where it needs to stay in the place that you set it down. There was a question in the chat. My palette is completely dry, but my brush is what brings the water to it. If your paint seems really watery, maybe you just have a lot of water in it. It's okay. Some people spray their whole palette and want the whole thing to be so watery. Um, I don't like doing that. Yeah, impressionistic is perfect. That's kind of what this is anyways. It's a very impressionistic style. So yeah, some people like douse their whole palette in water, and I don't know, that always gives me anxiety. I'm like, I can't get it to be as dark as I want it to. So you probably just have brought too much water into your palette. Sometimes that happens to me, and then all I do is take my paper towel and like right in here. Let's say I'm using this orange and it's not getting very dark orange. Well, now that just looks really dirty, but you can see all that water in there. You can take your paper towel and just like tilt your palette, and then that'll attract all of that water to it. Um, if you're like, oh my gosh, my paint's going with it, let it the whole thing dry. It'll all evaporate out. And some of these paints have been in this palette for years, and they're still in there. Yeah, I just like to keep my paint dry and have my wet brush go in there and like dig into that paint so I can really get it on there. And if I do that with like, I'm gonna get a bunch of sap green on my brush here just for an example. So you can kind of see that my brush is green. Like that's how dark sap green can get without adding any black to it. Now, if I have more water, it's a little bit lighter. If I have even more water, it's really, really light. And so this is called the values. This is the darkest value it can be. Um, when I get new paints, I'll do something called a value scale, where I'll have it be as dark as it can be. and then see the whole color range as I just add a little more water to it. And it's all about how much white is able to shine through. So you were just kind of maybe working more on this end because you got more water in your palette. And if you let it dry, you'll be able to go back in a little later and get it to be darker. Okay, I'm gonna go back to doing that indigo. And this is also still my indigo. So I'm getting pretty dark up here now. I know that that's dark with blue, but that's still dark. You can give it a little blend with some water if you want. And just if you want to come back into this section with any more of the sap or any more of the indigo to get that really fun texture. We are going to come into this with a dark green that we are going to make together in just a moment. But I want to just finish up with the colors we already have. So like this is just my sap green and I just have more of the paint on my brush, so it's becoming darker up here. And that also pushes this stuff back into the distance. Is the road dry? Awesome. Getting some thumbs up. Okay, I think we're good. So, I gave that example of the value scale with the green. That goes for all of the colors ever. Um, so in here with your indigo, I want to barely touch the indigo, and so it's going to land more in the middle of the value scale because this is how dark indigo can be. It can get really, really dark. But if I just have it lightly on my brush, you can also dip it in some more water. And, come in here and give this some tree-like texture. But I am okay with leaving some spots in the middle, shining through. You can see I'm even coming in on the sides here. I'm gonna stop messing with that now. And if you could just take a little bit of that burnt umber and give this a trunk on that tree. Okay, I would like to mix one last color, a dark green together, but does anyone need a moment before we do that? I think we're all right. Okay. So, with some lemon yellow, I want to you can bring that into the center where you did the black mixture if you want. That'll help it get a little darker. We are all good on the black. My brush is a little contaminated, but it's going to be green anyways. So that's why it looks lime green. It still had some blue on it. But that is fine. So that's my lemon. And I want to bring over indigo. Now, when you do that, it's always going to be more lemon than indigo. I'm going to bring over a smidge more of it just to make it green. There we go. Now it looks like a dark green. Indigo is just super powerful of a color. I'm even adding some of that black that I mixed with you all to it just to get it a little bit darker. I'm going to give it a swatch. So that's a nice dark green color. That black really does help it. What's if you remember the black was made with indigo and burnt umber, and I used indigo and lemon. And so if you feel like it's still not dark enough, you can add a little bit more burnt umber, and that's basically making it a greenish black, which is totally fine. There we go. That's a just nice dark green. Here it is lighter, so you're seeing more of the paper shine through. Does anyone need any help with that or have any questions about that? I think we're okay. So I'm just going to come back into my sections here with that dark green. And it's really going to help get this to look three-dimensional. Especially if you go in with it pretty dark. Can't forget about this stuff. And what you'll notice by coming in darker is that it's going to lighten up a bunch of the areas as well. Um, if you need to come into that tree and add this darker bit to it, you can do that too. And I also want to take this green and do the palm trees. And you'll see I'm starting with just some swoops. And then just like we did over here, I'm just coming in, but I'm doing it more like hatch marks. So you can add more than what was originally there. Just wanted to get the whole thing in there. And here's a tip that I just give it to everyone. You can always come back and add more. We can't just easily take it away. So like with doing all of this like last details on the bush on this side, we've been looking at this painting for a little bit. It's kind of like in our minds. I don't know if anybody does like jigsaw puzzles, but if I'm doing a puzzle about an hour into just puzzling, I stop being able to find pieces. And it's because your brain gets used to the images, and then we can't see the forest through the trees. And so, what I tell people is after we've worked on something for a while, stop looking at it. Even come back to it tomorrow and you'll look at it with fresh eyes, and then you'll be able to tell, oh, I do want to add something here, which is fine. But sometimes if you're like, oh man, I wish I would have stopped there, that's when it's like, I should have stopped and looked at it the next day because it might have been just fine. So I'm gonna stop messing with this myself. And I think we are at a pretty good point in the class where if we want to hit stop recording and have people hold theirs up and get some feedback if they want.